Okay, good morning. So last time we were talking about the ARQ mechanism, and the final slide was about the use of the sequence number and the sequence number of the acknowledgements in a system where you have full duplex transmission between the source and the destination. And so we said that when you have full duplex transmission, A sends data to B and receives ACK from B, and B sends data to A and receives ACK from A. And data from A to B are sent in the same frame as ACK from B to A. From A to B, sorry. And data from B to A are sent in the same frame as ACK from B to A. And this is the piggybacking technique. So I think we saw already this example. I don't know, did we explain this? No. Okay, so what happens in this case, here actually we have only A that is continuously sending data to B, but then B is sending data in a discontinuous way. And both adopt the piggybacking mechanism, so the sequence number, the Sn, where you see them in black, they refers to the frames that are going from A to B. And if you see the acknowledgement numbers from B to A, they are also in black because they are acknowledgement of the same flow. Okay. The red instead represents the other flow from B to A. Sorry, the black is from A to B. Okay. The red is from B to A. And in fact, you see that Sn in red is the number of packets that B sends to A, and Rn in red is the number of acknowledgement that A sends to B. So A starts, and on the top you have the windows. On the top and on the bottom you have the two windows. The windows with the number of in black are referred to the flow from A to B, and in fact it's the transmission window of A. The window with the number red on the bottom is the transmission window of B. Then the red arrows that you see with dotted lines that are going towards the top or towards the bottom indicate when the entities of A and B are sending data to the upper layers. Okay, so each time data is received, a packet is received and the content is sent to the upper layer. So let's start with A that is sending the first frame. Sn is equal to 0, Rn is equal to 0. Window is of A is initialized at 0, and the size is 6 positions because it goes from 0 to 5. Okay. The same for the window of B that is initialized to 0 and goes from 0 to 5. So A starts sending data, and since we are in the go backend algorithm, once A sent the first packet, the first frame with Sn equal to 0, then A can go on sending also the other packets, waiting for the acknowledgement of the first packet. Since the transmission window allows to go on. And in fact, you see that A goes on sending 1, 2, 3, 4. And meanwhile, Rn is always 0 because A is waiting for packet number 0 from B. What happens on the B side? So, the first packet is received from A, Sn equal to 0. Then Rn is always 0, so that the window is locked. At a certain time, B generates a packet and sends it back, and you see that the first packet that is sent by B has Sn equal to 0, it's the packet number 0, but Rn is equal to 1 because it is acknowledging the first packet received by A. Okay? So it's Rn equal to 1 in black means that B received correctly Sn equal to 0, the packet 0 from A, and B is waiting for packet number 1 from A. While A is sending all the packets from 0 to 4 and all are received correctly, the first packet of B is traveling towards A, and it gets to A when A is sending the packet number 4. So as soon as this packet arrives to A, the content is sent to the upper layers, and since the packet has Rn equal to 1, the transmission window of A slides on by 1 position. So it is now 1 to 6. So A can continue the transmission without stopping, and now it can go up to 6. So it starts sending number 5, number 6. B is not transmitting immediately, but it starts transmitting another frame after it has received correctly frame number 2 of A. Notice that, for example, when B starts sending the second frame, the one with Sn in red equal to 1, B is also receiving frame number 3 by A, but frame number 3 is not completely received before frame number 1 is generated by B. So B cannot take into account that frame number 3 has been received correctly. Okay, because only after a frame is completely received, then it can be reported as an acknowledgement. So the second packet that B is sending to A has Rn equal to 3. That means I have received completely until frame number 2, because the acknowledgement in backend is cumulative. I am waiting for frame number 3. Okay. So this goes to A and arrives to A while A is sending frame number 6. And so again, the window of A slides on, but this time, since the last Rn received was 1, now Rn, the new Rn received is 3, the window slides by 2 positions, okay, because the acknowledgement is cumulative. Unfortunately, I don't have the point. In the meantime, on the B side, okay, A starts sending packets with Rn, red Rn, that is increasing, because when A starts sending its frame number 5, Sn number 5, it has already received the first frame from B. Okay. So now in this frame that is Sn number 5 black, A can report Rn equal to 1 in red, because it is acknowledging the first packet that B sent to A, that is Sn equal to 0. Okay. Let's see if I can. Maybe this is clear. So this was sent and received. So now here A can start sending a frame with Rn equal to 1. And if you see, when this frame arrives to B, it causes the slide of the window by one position, because now the last acknowledged packet was 0, and the first Rn, first non-acknowledging packet, is 1. Okay. And then the rest is always the same. So this is the case, obviously, when you don't have any error. So all the packets are received correctly, and also all the acts are received correctly. This is the case instead when there is an error, and specifically the error is on the frames that are sent from A to B. Okay. So now the windows are from 0 to initialized at 0, 4 in both A and B. Here we have the flow from A to B identified by the black color, the flow from B to A identified by the blue color. Okay. And so both starts sending packets without any interruption. So A starts sending from Sn equal to 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same is done by B. So let's look at what happens to the black flow from A to B. Packet 0 is received correctly. Packet 1 is also received correctly. Packet number 2 with Sn equal to 2 is affected by error, so it is dropped or received incorrectly during transmission. But however, the window of A allows A to send other packets beside this Sn equal to 2. Since we are in Go Backend, the rule is that the receiver can store packets in the buffer only if they are in sequence. Okay? So all the packets after number 2 that arrives out of sequence are dropped by B. In fact, you see that here you have the dashed lines. Potentially they can also arrive in a correct way, but B will drop them because number 2 is missing. So number 3 is already out of sequence, number 4 as well. And let's look at the acknowledgements that B is sending to A. So Rn is equal to 0 because it is waiting initially, it's waiting for packet 0. This is in the first 2 packets. Then in the third packet that B sends to A, the first packet of A has been already received correctly, so Rn is equal to 1. Then when B receives also from A the frame with Sn equal to 1 correctly, Rn becomes equal to 2. Okay? That means I am waiting for packet number 2. When so packet number 2 doesn't arrive because it is lost, so when B sends this frame with Sn equal to 4, still it repeats Rn equal to 2. Okay? Then B receives packet number 3 from A, but packet number 3 from A, even if it was received correctly, must be dropped because it is out of sequence. And you can see that in the next frame that B sends to A, Rn is still equal to 2 because B is saying I'm still waiting for packet number 2. Okay. And this goes on like that. And you can see that since Rn is equal to 2, this implies that the transmission window in A remains blocked. The transmission window in A was originally from 0 to 4, Then when A receives the first packet, the packet with Rn is equal to 1 from B, the window slides by one position. Now it's 1 to 5. Then when A receives Rn equal to 2, the window slides again. Now it's 2 to 6. But then remains blocked in that position because it can only move on when A will receive an Rn greater than B. Okay. So far it remains blocked in that position. At each time, a packet, a frame is sent, is transmitted, the timeout counter is initialized. Okay, so we don't see the timeout counter represented explicitly for all the frames, otherwise it would be a mess graphically, but you have to consider that the timeout is always initialized. Okay? And so in all the times when the ACK returns on time, so before the expiration of the timeout is reset. Like for example here, with Sn equal to 0, there is a timeout that is initialized also when this frame is transmitted, but then the Rn equal to 1 comes back on time before the timeout expires. Okay? So the counter is reset. The opposite holds for the packet Sn equal to 2 that is sent by A and it was lost. In fact, at a certain time, the timeout of this packet expires because there is no ACK that is coming with Sn with Rn equal to 3, obviously because the packet was lost. Okay? So when the timeout expires, A starts resending the whole window, the content of the whole window, all the packets from the bottom of the window to the top of the window. Okay. And you can see that there is also a gap here because since the window was blocked, before this expiration of timeout, A reached the top of the window. Okay. So the last packet that A was permitted to send is Sn equal to 6. Then A had to stop. Okay. Here you have the timeout that expires, so the window was from 2 to 6, so A starts retransmitting from the sequence, the frame with the sequence number equal to 2. Okay. And that's the yellow set of frames. And then at a certain point, this frame Sn equal to 2 arrives correctly, finally in B, and you can see here the last, the one before the last, the frame before the last, generated by B, finally it has Rn equal to 3, which allows the window in A to slide on and transmission can go on. Okay. Notice that when the packets are discarded because out of order, but they were received correctly, before discarding the packet, B reads into the header of the packet in order to read the value of Rn that is transmitted by A. So for instance, here you see that the packet with Sn equal to 3 sent by A has the blue Rn equal to 1. It is discarded by B, but you can see that since there is Rn equal to 1, the window of B can slide on by one position. Okay, so before discarding the packet, B reads the acknowledgement number that is contained, because it is belonging to the other flow, to its own flow. And you can see that the window of B keeps sliding on for all these steps. Okay. questions? So in this case, we have the loss of a packet in the direction of A to B. Here instead we have loss of 2 packets in direction from B to A, which depends on the flow from A to B is equivalent to the loss of 2 acknowledgements. But you can see that with the mechanism of timeout, things works as well. No? Here you have that A that starts sending packets, as in the previous case, the window is fixed from 0 to 4 for both in B and A. Then all the packets sent by A arrives correctly to B, and so they are acknowledged. And in fact, B, generating its own packets, starts writing Rn equal to 1, Rn equal to 2, and so on. However, the packets that are going from B to A, these 2 ones, that's number 1 and number 2, got lost or are arrived with errors, so discarded by A. And therefore, the window of A remains blocked because the only acknowledged that has been received is with Rn equal to 0, which makes the window stay at the same position as before, as at the initial position. So Rn equal to 1 and Rn equal to 2 get lost, so the window is blocked. And also in this case, A arrives to transmit up to the top of the window, so the transmission has to stop because the window goes from 0 to 4, and A has to stop. Not only that, but also at a certain point, the timeout on the first packet expires because the acknowledgement of the first packet and on the second were lost. Okay. As soon as the timeout of the first packet expires, A starts to get into the retransmission mode, and it starts to retransmit all the window. The content of the window that goes from 0 to 4, so it starts retransmitting frame number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on. Notice that these frames were received correctly by B, so they were fed to the upper layers. When B receives this Sn equal to 0, it is out of sequence because now it's not that the frame is missing, but it's a duplicate of the frame that has been already received. So it is simply discarded, and you can see that here in this case, B sends back, so the first packet that is sent after receiving the duplication of Sn equal to 0 is this one, and B sends again Rn equal to 5, okay, because it is still waiting for packet number 5 from A. When this packet arrives to A, that is since B has received correctly all the packets, even if A does not receive anything about Sn equal to 0, okay, so the packet is lost for A, and also Rn equal to 2, A receives the first packet from B with Rn equal to 3, that is this one, okay. So even if A is in the retransmission mode, so it is retransmitting all the packets, the acknowledgement number in this packet here, Rn equal to 3, is able to shift the window by 1 position. So now the window is from by 2 positions. So the window is from 3 to 7, okay? And then the retransmission goes on. Also the window starts sliding on. So at the end, basically A retransmit Sn equal to 3, Sn equal to 4, and then start transmitting immediately the new frame Sn equal to 5. Okay. And on the other side, there is also a timeout that expires in B, because the two packets that were lost were also packets that contain data from B to A. This is another case where you don't have errors during the transmission, but only a delay in receiving the ACKs. Here the window initially is from 0 to 3 in both directions, and A starts transmitting 1 to 0, 1, 2, 3. All the packets arrive correctly in B, but B is slow in sending its own message, because B is waiting to receive data from the upper layers before sending any message. And so this message, Sn equal to 0, with the acknowledgement number Rn equal to 2, arrives in A too late, because in the meantime, the timeout on the first frame, Sn equal to 0, has already expired. And before also A had reached the top of the window, so it had to stop transmitting. So A starts the retransmission mode and starts retransmitting all the frame, the content of the window, so Sn equal to 0, 1, 2. Here A receives Sn equal to 0 with Rn equal to 2, which makes the window slide by one position from 2 to 5. Then at a certain time, after a while, since all the packets already arrived correctly in B, A receives this other frame from B with Rn equal to 4, that is a cumulative acknowledgement. And notice that these arrive in A before A has completely retransmitted all the window, the whole window. Okay? Because A was retransmitting, but at that time he retransmitted only 0, 1, and 2. Since this packet arrives with an acknowledgement number of equal to 4, now the window slides on, and it slides on going to the position number 4. Okay. So the original packet Sn equal to 3 is not retransmitted, because as effect of this cumulative acknowledgement, the window slides on too much, and so the first packet to transmit is the new packet with Sn equal to 4. Okay. This can also occur. It always depends on which kind of acknowledgement A is receiving while it is in the retransmission mode. Okay. This is a case when we can use the NAC. So again, we have A that is transmitting. The first packet get lost. B is not receiving anything from A because the first packet got lost, but B receives the second packet that is with Sn equal to 1. So only after B has correctly received the second packet with Sn equal to 1, B can be sure that the first packet was lost, okay, is missing from the sequence. So the second packet is dropped because it is out of sequence. Sn equal to 1 is dropped. But the implementation of go backend in this case, which is a spatial implementation, is such that in this case B can generate a NAC, negative acknowledgement. And the negative acknowledgement is sent to A, indicating Rn equal to 0 because that is the packet that is missing. Okay. At this point, as soon as A receives this NAC, A can start the retransmission mode. And this is an advantage because imagine that the timeout was set at this time interval. Without the NAC, A should have waited to transmit to enter the retransmission mode until the expiration of the timeout. Since in the, so A should have, for example, transmitted also frame number 5, frame number 6, which actually, since they are out of sequence, will be discarded by B. And also A should have stopped transmitting at frame number 6, as we have seen in the previous case, because the window is locked from 0 to 6. The transmission of 5 and 6 actually is useless because we know already that they will be discarded. Instead, with the NAC, A can start retransmitting soon. So the NAC has an effect of anticipating the timeout, increases the efficiency.
In this scenario, what if the NAC has to be transmitted for the last packet? When will it be transmitted?
You mean from the last packet of the sequence?
From the last packet
ever. It's impossible. You cannot transmit that for the last packet because you can transmit a NAC only when you receive correctly a packet that is next to the one that is missing. So in the case of the NAC, if the last packet is missing, the only mechanism is the timeout. So notice that these N in this case has no sequence on the effect on the retransmissions because they are all they don't move the window for more than one step. So this is the last example. We will see other examples during exercise, and also you will have to practice with these scenarios. These systems often get very much complicated as soon as you increase a little bit the complexity, and sometimes it's very easy to make mistakes. So we will try to keep the examples simple as possible. This is basically the procedure of error control that is used with both go backend and select and stop and wait, and we have understood that we need to number the frames and also the acknowledgements. However, when this a session is initialized, there must be a technique to select the initial sequence number and the initial sequence numbers for the sequence Sn and for the sequence Rn. And this must be done in an opening phase or in a phase where A and B, the two entities that are connected, agree on a specific value of Sn and specific value of Rn in both the directions. And this will require a setup phase in all this kind of mechanism of error control. Now we will look more closely to the mechanism used in TCP, and you will see that in the setup phase also the sequences are initialized. There is another possibility that we have when we introduce this sliding window system. We have introduced it so far for the retransmissions, so as a tool for the error control and error recovery. But actually, it can be also used as a tool of flow control. In the typical case where we need flow control is when we have a source and the destination. The source is sending packets or frames to the destination. In the destination there is a buffer that is receiving from the network, and this buffer is written from the network, from the source to the destination direction, and is read by the applications that are running in the destination. Usually the destination is a host. Here you have applications. We have already said several times that applications take data from the socket, from the interface towards the network in an asynchronous way, not necessarily as soon as data arrives. So if the applications are slow in reading this data, the buffer that is located here gets full, because the source continuously is sending information in the destination. This information is retrieved or cancelled from the buffer at a slower rate. So in order to avoid that at a certain point you have an overflow, that means that data that arrive to the destination are dropped, must be dropped, the source in some way has to be notified that the space in the destination is getting exhausted. So when the source knows it, the source starts slowing down sending of the data. So how can we do this? We can use the technique of we can exploit the tool of the sliding window. So far we have seen that in the GoBackN, for example, we have a transmitter window, transmission window of a certain number of positions, W positions, and the source cannot send more than W frames without receiving the ACK. So imagine that the ACK is not returning to the source at a certain point, as we have seen in the examples, the source stops sending the frames. And the ACKs are sent to the receiver when the packets are checked and they are controlled in terms of the error, then the ACK is sent back. But now we can introduce another say trick, that is, we send the ACK to the receiver not only when the packet is checked and it is received correct, but also when the packet is read and removed from the buffer by the upper layers in the receiver. Okay. So the packet arrives at the receiver does not send the ACK immediately to the sender only because the packet has been received correctly, but it sends the ACK only when the packet is removed from the buffer and read by the upper layers. So if the receiver gets slow in sending the ACKs because the upper layers are too slow in emptying the buffer, what happens? That these ACKs does not arrive to the transmitter. So the transmitter starts to experience timeout expirations and start increasing the number of retransmissions. So in this way, the flow control and the sliding window for error check are strongly linked. How can we avoid that the transmitter start too many retransmissions that are actually unuseful because in any case the receiver is slow. No? We could increase the timeout, but this has a lot of drawbacks as we have already seen, because if in case of failure then the sender will wait ages before sending the next packet. Instead, a smarter solution is to exploit the usage of the field of to exploit the sliding window. So we can introduce a field in the header, the AX, the acknowledged. So in the AX messages that are sent from the receiver to the sender now will not only contain the number of the acknowledgement, but also another field that is W, which indicates a size of window, a window size. So, if this window size indicates the remaining space that is available in the buffer of the receiver, when the sender gets these acknowledgement messages, he knows something about the state of the receiver. And in particular, he knows how much space is still available in the buffer of the receiver. Okay. So the best thing to do is to adapt the sending window to this value that is received. Okay. If the sender adjusts its sender window according to this value that is received by the receiver, then it start limiting by itself the rate of the transmission. So it will stop before starting to retransmitting packets, and it will avoid going on to transmit other packets. So this is basically the trick. When we want to use the sliding window mechanism also for the control of the flow, which means controlling the rate at which the transmitter produces information, the receiver sends back this field W that indicates the remaining space in the buffer, and on the other hand, the transmitter resizes its transmitting window according to this field. Okay. So we have a dynamic adjustment and permanent adjustment of the transmitting window. So far we have seen the transmitting window with a fixed size. Here the transmitting window has a variable size which depends on the state of the receiver. So this is an example. You can see here that now the source initially has a window size that is 4, so the window goes from 0 to 3, and it starts sending the packets. Here we have only a unidirectional flow, so that it's easier to understand. On the other side we have the destination, and here you can see that the destination has a buffer that can hold up to 4 packets. That's the receiver buffer. And on the bottom line you can see the application, and when we have this red arrow pointing down, it means that the application has retrieved information from the receiver buffer. Okay. And it has read a packet and deleted the packet from the buffer. So what is the status of the buffer? Initially the buffer is empty, so you have 0 packets in the buffer. When the packet 0 arrives at the destination, now you have a packet 0 in the buffer, and you can see here that there is a time gap before the application take this packet from the buffer. So the destination sends back to the source an acknowledgement saying that R1 is equal to 1, and the positions available in the buffer are 3, because I have one buffer that is stored waiting to be read in the buffer. As an effect of the window, in the meantime, the source starts sending the other packets. So packet number 1 arrives to the destination. Again, here the packet is stored in the buffer. However, the first packet was already taken away by the application, so now the second packet is stored in the buffer. We have still 3 positions available. So the second acknowledgement says n equal to 2 and w is equal to 3. When the sender, the source, receives the first ACK, you see that the window moves on, slides on by 1 position, but at the same time it shrinks, because instead of going to 4, the top, instead of going having 4 as top, it has only 3. It shrinks according to the W value that has been received. The second acknowledgement makes the window slide by 1 position without modifying the size, because the size is still 3. And the same also for the third acknowledgement. Here it happens that the second packet remains, the packet number 3, number 2 remains in the buffer, packet number 3 remains also in the buffer, and now the application becomes busy, so it doesn't read anything from the buffer. Okay? So the buffer starts getting full, and you can see that in the acknowledgements, the value of W that is sent back starts decreasing. So here is W equal to 2, here is W equal to 1, and here is W equal to 0. W equal to 0 indicates that nothing can be transmitted. Okay? But even before the transmission of the source had to stop, because the source reached the top of the window. You can see here the window goes from 2 to 4, then from 3 to 5, then 4 to 5 because it is shrinking, then 5 to 5 shrinking again, and then there is no window anymore. Finally, the application takes away all the packets that are stored in the buffer, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. At this point, the destination sends another acknowledgement that is the repetition of the last one, but now this Rn is the same, but now the value of W is different, and by W equal to 4, it's basically it forces the window of the source to open again. Okay, so now you can see that the source goes from 6 to 9. And so now the source can start sending packets again. So in this way, by this mechanism, the rate of the source has been automatically adjusted according to the capacity of the destination to store packets. And we don't have any overflow. Questions about this mechanism? There is also the possibility of playing some tricks. For example, with the W field that the window sends to the receiver sends to the source is usually it should be as we have said before it should be reporting the state of the buffer, but it's not necessary that the receiver tells the truth all the time. For example, it may keep a safety margin, so instead of reporting exactly the remaining space in the buffer, which is R, it will report R minus this margin M. So it declares that the buffer is full even if it is not so. And this is a mechanism that increases robustness in case of segments that arrive before the value of W is received by the sender. And also it can wait until the buffer will be emptied for a fraction. So if the buffer is has almost no positions or no positions at all, instead of declaring a W exactly equal to the size of the buffer, the receiver keeps the value at 0, so it stops the sender to send anything, waiting for packets that maybe are missing, so waiting for the buffer to be filled up in a significant way before allowing the transmitter to send data again. Sorry, to wait for the buffer to be emptied for a certain amount. And this is a way to avoid oscillations, because if this mechanism that is basically a feedback mechanism is too sensitive to the variations that can start oscillation. Okay, so these are tricks, but we will see the application of this mechanism to the TCP case that is more concrete. Questions? So if not, let me go to the second set of slides that I have uploaded this morning, again on the transport layer. So at the end of the transport layer, I will upload a version with all the slides in a single file that is more comfortable. So now we have concluded this part on the general mechanism of reliable transport, like retransmission and flow control by sliding window, we can start talking about the TCP protocol in a more deep way. First of all, the TCP protocol is standard by IETF. Actually, there are several documents that specify all the aspects of this protocol. It is one of the first protocols that was standardized in Internet, so it's very old, but still very much used, and it has a lot of particular techniques that requires many documents. It provides a reliable transportation, which means that segments, the data units at the transport layer, are delivered to the source, from the source to the destination, in correct sequence and without any errors or missing segment. And so it's very useful for applications that rely on error-free file transfer, as we have already discussed by talking about the application layer. It's online with the philosophy of having a simple and not reliable network service, while a dependable transport service which makes the connection reliable for the applications. Moreover, it also provides an end-to-end congestion and flow control. The flow control is similar to what we have already explained. The congestion control is a very related issue. So again, using the same mechanism, but instead of reacting against the congestion of the destination, the congestion control reacts against the congestion of the network in between. Okay, so it is a way to avoid the congestion of the network independently of the state of the destination. TCP is connection oriented, so we need the setup phase, data phase, and the tear down phase. Before sending data, we must establish the connection. The connections are always full duplex, so you are in the situation as we have depicted just before. Data are sent to from A to B and from B to A as well. Since we have the mechanism for error control and sliding window and so on, the flow in one direction of data is then backed by a flow on the opposite direction of acknowledgement messages. Acknowledgement messages can be inserted using the piggybacking technique into the data messages in the other direction. So in terms of the relation with the applications, we have seen this picture many times. Now we see it specialized for the TCP. The applications are in communication with the transport layer by the socket ports or that are the service access point of the transport layer towards the application layer. And when a TCP connection is operated, there is one application in one side that is connected by a socket to the TCP system functions provided by the operating system, and on the other side there is a responding application also connected by a socket. When the applications release to the transport layer application layer messages like HTTP messages, SMTP messages, and so on and so forth, the operating system on one side and on the other takes these messages, segment them. So this is why the data plane, the data format in TCP is called segment. Messages are segmented, and the content of the pieces of the messages are put encapsulated into the TCP segments. The TCP segments are then encapsulated into IP packets and then sent on the network. At the TCP layer, so at the transport layer, you have an end-to-end flow of TCP segments from one side to the other. The size of the segment is variable, and the transformation of the application data into segments is done by passing through a byte data structure. So in a different way from what happens in UDP. The buffer that is placed at the interface between the application layer and the transport layer, in the case of TCP, is a byte buffer. So the applications writes data in this buffer as a stream of bytes. Okay? They are not putting packets, but they are simply putting stream of bytes. And then the operating system, when it has to create the segments, reads these bytes from the buffer, from the output part of the buffer, and put the bytes into the payloads of the segments. So each segment contains a certain number of bytes of the original message from the application. Then once the segment is created, so these bytes are also added with a TCP header, the segment is transferred to the network. And again, this operation of taking data from the socket buffer and sending them through the network is done in a synchronous way compared to the activity of the applications, of the processes that deposit this data into the buffers. The segments have variable size, but this parameter, the length of the segment, is a critical parameter in terms of performance. Potentially, that in each TCP session, the two operating systems are free to choose any kind of size for the segments, but we will see in a minute that this decision has an impact on the performance, and so it must be taken with a particular mechanism. TCP uses a mechanism to control packet loss and errors that is similar to the go back N we have already explained, at least in the let's say simplest implementation of TCP. Another interesting fact about TCP is that there is just one protocol, but with several implementations, and each implementation has something different one for the other. These implementations are called flavors. So TCP has many flavors. There is the oldest flavor, which is the ones that we will look into it into more carefully, which is the simplest one. And then other flavors that came out later are optimized for many aspects, but are more complicated. So in the simplest flavor, the control mechanism is for the packet loss is of go back N type. So the as any go back N system, we need to number both the data and the acknowledgement, as we have seen. And since these buffers of TCP works as byte streams, the decision was taken to use a numbering based on the bytes. So you don't number the segments, but the numbering is for the bytes. So TCP numbers each byte that is transmitted, and so each byte has a sequence number. The segments are formed by a group of bytes. Obviously, not each byte is numbered explicitly, otherwise you would have a mess of information that is useless. The technique is just to number the first byte that is inserted, that is traveling in a certain segment. Okay, so in the header of the segment, you will find the number of the first byte in the sequence of the byte numbers. since everything works byte-wise, also the windows are measured in terms of bytes. So the size of the window is the number of bytes that can be transmitted staying in the window. And so the header of the packets carries the sequence number of the first byte. And the receiver, when it has to send an acknowledgement of the received data, it will send an ACK message when it is acknowledging all the bytes that have been received so far. So if the receiver receives a certain segment, the segment reports the number of the first byte that is contained in the segment. The receiver receives all the segment. It calculates the number of the last byte that was contained in the segment. Then when it sends back the ACK, it will send the ACK with the number that is pointing to the next byte. So the last byte plus 1, because the concept is always that the ACK means I am waiting for that number. So the receiver is waiting for the next byte compared to what has been received. And then there is also the timeout mechanism. So if the transmitter does not receive an ACK on a segment, then and the timeout expires, then it enters the retransmission mode. We will look at all these concepts better and with more words just in a minute later on. So now let us first look at the format of the TCP messages, the TCP segments, and at the way to set up the connection. So this is the first phase, the setup phase. We have already seen the setup phase when we were doing these exercises about the application layer, but we always look at them as represented it in a very schematic way. Now we are looking into the details. So this is the header of a TCP segment. As you can see, it's much more complicated than the header of the UDP segment. So you have here the data, and on the top, and again, a certain number of fields. They are again represented in the 32 module way. So you have rows of 32 bits. Again, because it is according to the representation of the IP packets. And so in the first line, you see that there are the source and the destination ports, but like in the UDP, but then you have other segments, other fields that you don't have in the UDP, and the number of rows of 32 bits that make up the compulsory header, so the header that is always present in all the segments, is 5. So you have 5 rows that are always present. That means 20 bytes, because each row is 4 bytes. And then there is also a set of optional parameters, optional fields that can go up to 40 bytes. Okay. So these optional fields may be absent or may be present according to the type of the TCP segment that we are considering. And then we have data with variable length. So let's look at each of the fields. First, we have the source port and the destination port. This is exactly like in UDP, 16 bits each. You know already that 16 bits is the size of the port number. And then the second field is the sequence number, which is used to number to set up the numbering system of the messages. And this is corresponding to the SN. Okay? The sequence number in this case is representing the number of the first byte of the payload. The number of the first byte at the center of the payload, but the number has a meaning, of course, if you define the sequence. So in this case, it means that the first byte that is in the payload is the number Sn in the sequence of all the bytes that are transmitted in that session, that TCP session, from the source to the destination. Okay. And it is 32-bit long. Then there is the acknowledgement number, which is used for acknowledging information that was coming from the other side. So we have the piggyback technique. So if this is a message that is sent by host A, sequence number is the number of bytes in the sequence, the flow from A to B. The acknowledgement number is the acknowledgement of this information that was sent from B to A. And the acknowledgement number is the sequence number of the next byte that the sender of the segment expects to receive. And it is valid only if there is a flag of the segment. Okay? So again, this is the next byte. The meaning is the next byte that I am waiting to receive from the sender. 32-bit means that this numbering system can go up to 2 to the 32, which is a very large number. Header length is a field that of 4 bytes that contains the total length of the TCP header, and it is measured. The length is measured as a number of 32-bit words. Okay? So if the value of header length is 5, it means that you don't have the option fields. Okay. So the maximum value of header length is 15 because we use only 4 bytes. Sorry, we use only 4 bits. Okay, so we can go up to 15, but 15 means 5 plus 10 rows of 32 bits. So in the total of 20 plus 40, 60 bytes. Okay. This is the window value, and it is exactly the field that is used to implement the dynamic window resizing. Okay. This is the value that is written by the sender in order to implement the flow control. Sorry, it's written by the receiver in order to implement the flow control in the sender. It's the indication of the received window size. So how much space we have in the receiver to host bytes so that the sender can adjust its rate. Checksum, we have already explained it by talking about the UDP. The same technique to calculate it as you have seen in the UDP. The only difference is that now checksum is compulsory, so it's calculated always. It may be disabled in some cases, but at least it should be compulsory. And again, it is done by considering all the header, the payload, plus the pseudo header, which means the other fields that we have seen in UDP. Then there is a set of flags, 8 bytes dedicated to flags. The first, each flag has a different meaning. So the first flag is called urgent, And as we will explain briefly, it is used to write urgent information inside the segment. So it was used originally to create like a control channel that is always checked with highest priority in a TCP connection. As you will see, it is not used very much. When this flag is set, then this field, the user pointer field that is in the header, has a meaning, and the meaning is that is a pointer to the beginning of the urgent block of data into the payload. Okay. So when UG's flag is set, the urgent pointer indicates in the payload in which position we have the block of urgent data. Next flag is ACK. When ACK is set, it means that the acknowledgement number is valid, so it should be used. But it also has an important meaning during the opening session, opening operation that we will see. The flag push is used to force the applications of the processes in the receiver to immediately read the data from the buffer. It's a command that is used to force the application to read that specific segment. And okay, we will go back to it later on. Reset is used to reset the connection immediately in a very abrupt way, but effective way. Synchronized is used in the setup phase. We look at it immediately together in combination with ARC. And fin is used for closing the connection. Again, we will get back to it later on. Finally, there is this the part that is the option fields. Options not necessarily have the size of 32 bit each. So there are some options that are shorter, but in any case here you must have an integer multiple of 32 bits. So you always must have an integer number of rows. And so in case the size of the option fields is not enough, there is some padding, which means unuseful information, usually zeros, that is placed there only to be compliant with the structure. Okay. The option fields are some of the option fields are important. In particular, the most important for us is one, and then there is another one that is useful to know how it works, but it's not so important. But there are a lot of options that has been defined. You can look at that if you go there to that site. Basically, there are two formats of these option fields: the long options and the short. The short options are called 1 byte options, and they are mainly used for the padding, so to make the header length a multiple of 32 bits. The most important option for us is the maximum segment size, which is actually the only one that we will use in this course. And it has this format, and it is used to agree on a specific maximum size for the segments. So it is exchanged by the two entities that are opening the TCP connection during the setup phase, so that they agree on a common value. And as you can see, information, the content and information is contained in that field that is 16 bit. So the maximum size that you can have is 65,535 bytes, because that is what you can address. The size is measured in number of bytes. If no MSS is specified, then the default is 536 bytes. This MSS refers to the number of bytes that is contained into the payload of the segment. So it's not the size of the segment, it's only the size of the payload, okay? Size of the data field. Why this field is quite important, and why it's also a critical field. Okay. If you look at the picture here down, this represents what happens when you have a message from the applications that is transformed into a set of segments, and then the segments are sent in the network. As you can see, each segment that is created by TCP is then encapsulated in an IP packet. Okay, so each segment is carried by a single IP packet. You cannot split the single segment into more than one IP packet. Then the IP packet is carried at layer 2 into frames that are the data link frames, okay, as we have explained at the beginning. Now, there are some systems, some transmission systems or local area networks in which the size of this data link frame is limited. Okay. And the maximum size that can be sent in the data link is called MTU, that is maximum transmission unit. Okay. It's the size of the payload of the data link frame. Here you don't see the data link frame, the header of the data link frame. You can see only the payload. And the payload, actually, there is a mistake. There should be the layers that are marked there are wrong. So you should have this layer is application layer, this layer is TCP, this layer is IP. The data link layer is here above. So MTU is the payload of the data link frame. The data link frame is hosting the IP packet. The IP packet is hosting the TCP segment, and the TCP segment is taking data from the application message. Okay. So this is the sequence. It is very nice and effective to allow that a single TCP message goes into a single IP packet, which in turn can be encapsulated in a single data link frame. So the size of the data link frame is important, and in particular what is important is the maximum size of the payload of the data link frame. For example, if the technology, the data link technology is Ethernet, the maximum payload of an Ethernet frame is 1,500 bytes. Okay, 1,500 bytes. So, if you take this into account, that you have this maximum payload of 1,500 bytes, then considering all the headers that are added at the IP layer and at the transport layer, so the TCP layer, you can calculate what is the size, the maximum number of quantity of data that you can insert into an IP, into a TCP segment, and that is the maximum segment size. Okay, so the maximum segment size if you want to design things properly and you want your network to be good, to perform well, should be decided taking the NTU into account. Okay? This is very strange because we are talking about a function that we carry out at the layer, the transport layer, which is implemented only in the host. But the parameters that we have to decide depends on the physical layer, on the data link layer. And this is an exception, and it's a critical aspect. And it has been solved in different ways. Today, the modern operating systems of the computers, so in the host, they run a specialized protocol that allows them to discover, to send messages, and to discover what is the minimum MTU that you find to reach the host that you want to reach. So before opening a TCP session, you don't see it, but actually your PC sends run this protocol trying to contact the destination host that will be the server, for example, to understand what is the MTU. Then when this MTU is learned by the network, is discovered, the operating system of your PC will use the proper value for the NSS, maximum segment size. How can we calculate the maximum segment size if we know the MTU? The formula is there, so you just have to take off the size of the IP header and the size of the TCP header. Both of them, the IP header and the TCP header, may be variable because there are these optional fields, but then you can do an estimation. So if you want to be liberal, you just consider the minimum size of the IP header and the TCP header, okay, which is 20 bytes in both cases. We have not seen the IP header yet, but it's 20 bytes. If you want to be very conservative, then you can use the maximum possible value of these headers, so it will be 60 bytes. This is done by the operating system, but it is very useful to know how it is done also by yourself. I will have to correct here this. This is not TCP, it's the application layer. This is TCP. And IP is somewhere here. And data link is below. That's bad. Do you have questions? Okay. So there is another option field, and then I stop. The second option field is called window scaling factor or window scale factor, and is an 8-bit field. It is used to multiply the value of the window parameter by a scale factor. The window parameter that is sent to the sender from the receiver, as we have seen in the previous slide, is that field here that is only 16-bit long. But if we want to make the window wider than this limit, we can use this window scaling factor. The default value is 1, so when it is not used, maximum value of the parameter is actually the receive window parameter. When it is used, the meaning is that the actual window size is what it is written in the field of the packet, the segment, multiplied by 2 by raised to the value contained in the scale factor field. Okay. And the maximum value for this field is 14, even if the field is 8 bit long. So in theory you can go up to a higher value, but the maximum acceptable is 14. So the maximum scaling factor is 2 to the 30. And in this way you can make the window the same size of the maximum volume of that you can use to number the byte, that is 2 to the 32. So the window is almost large as that value by using this scaling factor. Okay, the ports, we have already spent time on the ports, so it's not worth it. Okay, so tomorrow we will start looking at the setup phase and then the other issues regarding the TCP. Thanks.